Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the CANS bi-weekly TA call. First, I say that the attached item is not the current agenda. I apologize, I forgot to upload it, but if you are viewing on a computer, you should see today's agenda uploaded. We will begin with introductions and then provide some very quick updates and go right into the questions. And then we have a 20-minute discussion from the county, Merced, to discuss about their mental health providers providing CANs to children and children. So I'll just start. My name is Jeffrey Kopp. I'm with the Integrated Services Unit.
Good afternoon. Rebecca Buckmiller, Integrated Services Unit.
Hello, this is Janine Lesour with the Integrated Services Unit.
Good afternoon. This is Leslie Beltran with the Integrated Services Unit.
Hello, this is Lisa Ritchie with the California Department of Social Services.
Law Queen, CWDA.
If we could have the panelists on the phone introduce themselves.
Hi, this is Kim Suderman, CBHDA consultant.
Hi, Kim.
Hey.
Hi, it's April Fernando from Chapin Hall.
Hello, April. Thank you for joining us.
Julianne Sims with Merced County.
Hi, Julianne. Thank you for joining us. Okay. So some quick updates for this meeting is we will be canceling the December 26th call due to the holidays. Additionally, CDSS has to cancel the January 23rd call. So after today's meeting, we will convene on January 9th. So you should see those updates on the webinar schedule. Another update is that we are still processing and reviewing the questions that we provided last meeting that we went over. We're still reviewing them and drafting up responses, and we will send those out to the participants in the near future. And then also for those who have requested implementation plans from San Francisco and Sacramento regarding the implementation of CANS and the CFT process, we are still working with the county to obtain that information, and we will provide it to the audience at a later date. So if you requested that information, we did receive your request, and we will are in the process of developing a response.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jeff. So we're going to start today. This is Rebecca again with ISU with answering a few questions that have come in from that webinar, either through the chat feature or on the call. And the questions may not be responded to verbatim. We're trying to put questions and group them together so that we can answer appropriately so that all of our county and behavioral health partners can benefit from some of the responses. The first question today, is there an allocation provided for counties implementing the CANs? The short answer to that is at this time, there is not a allocation directed for completing the CANs. Counties are encouraged to use other allocations they have already in place for assessment process. Second question, would there ever be an instance? Oh, yes, go ahead.
Just wanted to clarify on that. That's for the child welfare allocation. On the mental health side, if they're doing the CANs for the mental health, there's allocations on their part that information was issued under information notice and whatnot. So if there's somebody from DHCS who could clarify on that.
Yeah, this is Chuck from DHCS. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Chuck. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, we do. There is a mechanism for counties on the mental health side to be reimbursed for the cost of administering the CANs, and I think it's 17052 is the IN that describes that process. And then we're also we may be updating that process to be a little more sort of less burdensome, I think would be the right word for counties. But we haven't figured that out yet.
Okay, great. Thank you, Chuck. Moving on, next question, I believe this is for you, April, Fernando. Would there ever be an instance that a summary of the cans in lieu of the full cans be shared during the CFT?
It depends, of course. And what it depends on is this. So there are some counties where that are going to be using their county version of the cans, which in all cases is much longer than the California Cans 50 or the California IP cans. What tends to be overwhelming about those versions is their length. And so when families see all the items and all the actionable items, that can be overwhelming to them. But the content should not, however, be overwhelming, which is the typical reason that people want to only give a summary. And the reason why the content shouldn't be overwhelming is if the cans was completed in the manner it was intended to be completed, it was done in a collaborative consensus-based process, meaning that the young person and the family has gone over all the issues, all the items in the can, so to speak, through the discovery process or the assessment process, and should know what is on that cans. Now, sometimes in a CFT, right, and depending on the version of the cans that is used, sometimes a summary of the actionable items is what's presented rather than the full cans. And that is to help the CFT move through those actionable items to gain consensus more quickly. But really, there shouldn't be a reason that only a summary is provided. I think, again, if the assessment or the discovery process is one where families and young people are engaged and part of that process, there should be no reason that they can't see the full cans.
Okay, great. Obviously, and highlighting strengths always, right? So,
April, this is Law from CWDA. Could I ask a follow-up question to that? If there are items on the cans in which the youth has either objected to sharing or hasn't been discussed with others, how is that addressed in terms of a summary or some other aspect of the cans being shared?
Those are the instances in which sometimes you would maybe only discuss certain items and not discuss others for the time being. And again, this is a process, right? So sometimes, and depending on the item, if the item is a critical item, it's an item that was rated 3 by most people, and it's one that has to be central to the planning process, that discussion with the young person has to be done ahead of time to help them understand how it's necessary to talk about this issue within the CFT. So those are, clinical issues that we tend to deal with a lot, and which is part of that young person's journey towards understanding and participating in their own care. So there's not a stock answer for it. It really depends on the situation and the young person.
okay, great. Thank you, April.
Sure.
This next question also is for you. This, on CDS. The CDSS requires training on the cans for children and youth, separate training on the adult version and the 0 to 5 cans. So I think that, go ahead.
Go ahead. You can start since it's a question for CDSS, really.
Yeah, all right. So CDSS requires CAN certification through one of our training contract partners with Parade, and for the Core 50 items and the trauma component. Once you're certified in CANS, the other components are not required. There's no additional certification necessary. Am I correct, April?
That's correct. So I want to make sure people are clear on the difference between training and certification, right?
Okay, thank you.
Certification is one thing, and if you're certified on the CANS, you can use almost any version of the CANS according to the Parade Foundation. Now, counties may have more strict requirements, particularly if they have their own version, so people should check with their county mental health plans in particular. You can also use the CANS if you're certified, the ANSA, the adult version, if you're certified on the CANS. Now, training is different. So there are different items on the ANSA, some different items. There's a huge overlap, but there are some different items on the ANSA that are not on the CANS. And there are, as many of you know, some different items on the 0 to 5 version of the CANS that aren't on the CANS for 6-year-olds and up. And because of that, it's often recommended that people get training so that they understand what those items are, and also so that they can be with others when the process of asking questions or gathering information is discussed. So training and certification are two different issues.
Great, thank you. Okay, next question, Leslie.
So there's a question that asks, is there a single infographic or one-pager for the CANS? A one-page CANS info sheet has been created for families and youth and is currently being reviewed by stakeholders as well as youth. So we're hoping to have this released sometime in the near future, probably in the new year.
Right, well, yes, and so to circle back on that, we do have a couple of draft versions of one-pagers, and we are having our youth organizations review it, as well as our CFT implementation team. Interagency team is going to be taking a look at all of our communication materials and providing some input and guidance before we release them.
Thanks, Rebecca.
Okay, next question?
Okay. All right, this is Janine. The question is, where do we go to view recorded CANS TA webinars? So we are currently in the process of uploading the past webinars onto our CFT website for viewing, and we're hoping to have that on soon. So please stay tuned.
And I'd just like to clarify that the CFT webpage will offer links to the videos. The videos will be housed through the CDSS official YouTube page, but we're in the process of having those uploaded. So, but the CFT webpage will be the one-stop for finding all archived videos.
Mm-hmm. And links to them. Yes, thanks, Jeff. Thank you. Next question, Kim Suderman, are you still on the line?
I am.
Hi, Kim.
Okay, so it says, what is the required effective date for CANS implementation for STRTPs? So STRTPs are not the entity that is responsible for conducting the CANS. It is CDSS, it is CWS, Child Welfare, and the mental health plans that have the responsibility. And the effective date for the mental health plans has started. There were 2 groups, and Chuck could additionally add, but, I was just glancing, I don't have the the ACIN in front of me, but the first group started in July. And so, and then the next group, Chuck, are you there? What was the next date?
October 1.
October 1. So however, it is on the mental health plan and child welfare to determine who is going to be conducting the CANS. And so there may be a situation where the plan or CWS has asked the STRTP to conduct the cans, but that's going to be county by county, not STRTP by STRTP. That will be an individual county responsibility to determine who's doing that. Hopefully that covers the question. And then it says which version of cans will STRTPs use? And that's, again, the same situation. If they're conducting it for child welfare, then there are the elements that we've discussed in the past regarding the CANS 50, I just went blank. The additional, the additional pieces for the TAY population and the trauma ones. And mental health plan does not have that requirement, so they only have the 50. So, and then again, child welfare conducts all the way 0 through 18. Mental health plans are conducting 5 up through age 20. So it's not really about the placing agency, the placement. It's about the responsible agency and how they're operating. Hopefully that covers it.
Yeah, and this is Locke from CWDA. What Kim just said is the aspect of who's obligated to conduct the CANs, et cetera, but it doesn't preclude or prevent an STRTP from putting into their program statement that as part of their own policies and procedures that they'll conduct a CANs upon, for example, upon admission. That's their own requirement, and that would be a separate conversation from what Kim had talked about.
Yeah, thank you, Locke. And I would just add that if the provider has intended to do that, I would encourage some discussion during the child and family team so that there's not overlap and the child doesn't feel overly queried about things. So if the mental health plan or child welfare just conducted a CANS and met with the child and then the provider does it again, we just don't want the child and family to feel overly assessed. And so just to, again, I think the discussion in the child and family team is really critical about the administering of the CANs and any tools, any assessment tools that are going to be used by the provider would be important to discuss during the CFT.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, do we have any follow-up questions from the chat?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Okay. Do you want to go ahead and read those off?
Yeah. So, who is responsible for completing the CANs if the kid is in an STRTP that have presumptive transfer?
There was a lot of muffling while you read the beginning part of that. I'm sorry, could you read that again?
Okay, Leslie will repeat it. So basically, Kim, what the question was is who will be responsible for completing the CANs if the youth is in an STRTP and presumptive transfer is in place?
That I think, again, the placing agency and the responsible mental health plan need to have a dialogue. So if the child is presumptively transferred, then it would be the host county mental health plan that the placing agency should have a dialogue with. If the child is waivered, then they would have that dialogue with their county of jurisdiction mental health plan. And so those two would have the dialogue. And then again, the two agencies could discuss whether the STRTP, if they have been trained and are capable of conducting the CANs, whether they would do it, pick that up, or whether one of the two would do it. So that dialogue needs to happen really very quickly and probably as a part of the CFT that happens before placement occurs, unless there's an emergency placement. Otherwise, there should be time during the CFT prior to placement and prior to going to the Interagency Placement Committee meeting.
Okay, great, thank you. Mark, you have any follow-up? Okay. How are we, Jeff? Do you have time?
The STRTP is only doing the CANS 50, and CWS is required to do the CANS, the IP CANS. We would have to do it over again anyway, correct?
So could you
repeat that?
If the STRTP is only doing the CANS 50 and CWS is required to do the CANS IP, we would have to do it over again anyway. Is this correct?
I think the way I'm understanding the question is if you're redoing the entire CANS based on the the additional module, the additional questions that's required from child welfare, the answer is no. The Child Welfare Agency would be responsible for completing those additional questions if they do not already have a contractual agreement in place with their behavioral health to complete them on their behalf. And then those questions could be combined with the other, and for a whole picture, case management picture with the CANS done by the Behavioral Health Agency. Does, April, do you want to provide any input to that?
No, you answered it fine. So because the 50 items are exactly the same between the two versions, the only thing that is different for STRTP, because I don't think there are any early childhood kids in STRTPs, but would be the trauma exposure items, those 12 additional items.
Right, okay.
Rebecca, this is
Okay,
Richard.
great.
Can you hear me?
Yes, hi, Richard. Want to
This
chime
might be a
in?
good place just to, this might be a good place just to emphasize that, we have some business rules in place in behavioral health, on the mental health plans, and in child welfare, because they give us structure to get things done and to be sure that we have the resources in place to work with young people in the system. But sometimes they get in the way of doing the right thing in the most timely manner. And we just need to continually emphasize for ourselves as a field and in this industry that those rules can't get in the way of a timely assessment. And so if you have a young person in care and you're waiting on the systems to give you direction about which CANS or is the CANS complete or any of the other myriad of questions around this process, we should really focus on what the young person and the family need, which is a timely assessment. Let's just get it done.
Okay, great point, Richard. Thank you for bringing that up. Right.
Someone has made a comment that it would be difficult to discuss with the mental health provider in the host county prior to placement because you don't know which provider will be assigned to the case in the host county. That was a comment from Red Forge County.
So, Kim, could you hear that?
I only heard part of it.
Yeah, so it's really more, I know, I'm sorry, we apologize. Our room's kind of large and we're spread thin. When you're talking about where a youth is placed, you might not know the provider that's going to be assigned to the youth in the host county. And so it may be difficult to, what was the initial part of the question? Maybe difficult to discuss with MHPs, maybe some of the case specifics and until the provider's been assigned. Typically, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, but if the child is going to be placed out of county and you know which county, it means you probably know which provider, meaning provider agency, not individual practitioner. And so, oh, that's good.
Hold on just a second. Hi, we apologize. I don't know, for a second we had a little bit of a feedback on the line. Okay.
Okay, so what I'm saying is, if you know which agency provider agency the child is being placed with, then the mental health plan should be able to have a dialogue already prior to placement during the CFT, should be able to know who and how they want to have that assigned in partnership with the placing agency, assuming, since we're talking about CANS, it would be child welfare. So that dialogue could still happen, determining they would know which group home, which STRTP the child is going to. Therefore, they would know whether there's an existing contract, whether mental health has an agency they're using, or whether they are conducting it themselves. That all should be known, so that really all can be worked out prior to placement if everybody's talking during a child and family team about how that can be worked out, unless it's an emergency placement.
And this is law from CWDA. This also assumes or presumes that that a CANS has not been done as part of the discussion. So remember, April and others have talked about this is an iterative process. So at the point where a child is determined to be going into an STRTP, there should be some discussions at a CFT and IPC and so on and so forth. But it's also likely that there's some elements of CANS that has been discussed prior to that. So it would be pretty rare to do a complete CANS within an STRTP in terms of that. And that's where, as Kim said, there has to be a lot of coordination and communication with the host county MHP.
Right, and with the provider. And for providers that don't already have a mental health plan, a contract in place, they should have within their program statement how they plan also to refer youth out, and if they have any local agreements in place for providing youth services to within the county.
Right,
Okay,
and then they'll have time for the update of CANS. There should be plenty of time to have that dialogue after placement as to who will conduct the update, the CANS update. So there's then plenty of time to get that done afterwards. And again, sort out who's going to do it and how that will work.
Right, absolutely. Okay, thank you. Okay, well, I think it's time to move on to have a listen and learn from Merced County. Julianne Sims Kulo, I'm not sure if I pronounced your last name right, Jamo. Julianne, program administrator for, and I know that you have your behavioral health partners in the room with you. Do you mind introducing them?
Correct. I have Macy Zhang. She's a clinician with behavioral health in the room. And then on the phone, we have Betty Hoskins, who is a division director for the Children's System of Care. And I also have our SPOC, Johnny Corbin, and Angeline Bettis, one of our social workers.
Okay, fantastic. So for those of you on the line, Merced's going to share a little bit about their planning a process for embedding the CANS within the CFT process and how their contract and MOU process has been working out so far to provide some input for other county partners. I'll let you take it from there, Julianne.
Thank you. So we are very early on into our CANS and within the CFT process. We were a county that did not do teaming prior to implementing CFTs. So kind of that transition into teaming was, it took us some time, but I think we're where we need to be in terms of having social workers on board and educating our families about the teaming approach. With CANS, we have just started a pilot and we're very slowly phasing CANS into our general practice, similarly to how we phased in KDA. So we started with certain units and that's how we're doing it now. So we have only done 4 CANs at this point in time, but we've completed them and shared them with our behavioral health. One of the things one of the strengths for Merced County is that we have a very strong relationship with our behavioral health. And although we're not under the same, department as some counties are, we still, are able to call each other and have each other on the line very quickly for services for kids. So we do have an MOU that is going through our county council review. In that MOU, we have some, we haven't necessarily spelled out specific expectations, but some of the conversations we've had in terms of, you know, the completion of CANS is that all of our kids will get a behavioral health assessment, regardless of what they rate on the behavioral and emotional domain for CANS. We will complete our current mental health screening tool with some tweaks as we go along, and the social worker will complete the behavioral emotional health domain as well as the trauma domain. They will submit it to our behavioral health partners. Behavioral health will take it from there. The goal is to get it done to have the assessment within the first 30 days so that we can get the CANS back to have within the CFT, and that initial CFT would happen within the first 60 days. One of the things we are working diligently on is ensuring that if we have open behavioral health services, whether it's the initial child and family team meeting or ongoing, that the clinician is present, so that the clinician can be the one to help interpret the CANS assessment along with the social worker. We are exploring how to have a clinician present at initial CFTs, even if we don't open services, just so that we have someone for consultation in terms of the CANS. One of the things that's worked well for us to do that is we have co-located clinicians at our human services buildings. We have 3 currently with a 4th on the way. One of the things we're collaborating on really is kind of sticking as much to the current KDA process, because we have a good KDA process. And continuing on that path, I think we'll have a smoother implementation of CANS. One of the challenges I foresee is we do utilize a contracted provider for our child and family teams, and that poses its own set of strengths, but also some challenges in terms of we don't always get the right people to the table. It's hard to schedule with, you know, a third party doing some of the scheduling piece. I made some notes earlier. I apologize. And also in terms of if we don't have the CANS completed, our facilitator and our scheduler for child and family teams don't necessarily know that. So closing some of that communication gap is something that we continue to work on, so that we can make sure that everybody coming to the team is aware of where we are with the CANS. Some people asked some questions that we've been exploring already in terms of the summary that was mentioned in the facts earlier. So what we've discussed as a team is that if we feel the clinician or the social worker that there may be some very sensitive information or information that may cause some type of safety concern for any member of the child and family team, that we would have a provider meeting versus full disclosure of the CANS, because we want to ensure safety for everybody in that team, especially the children and the youth. We have not had that happen yet, but that is the plan, and I do think there are situations where it may very well happen. Another barrier we're exploring is our behavioral health does the, well, we're doing the CANS 50 plus the trauma, but they are not yet implemented doing the CANS 0 to 5. And so we would have to, as an agency, child welfare gets trained and ensure we're all certified to do these 0 to 5 for all of our kids. Betty, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think you did a very complete and thorough job.
And so that's kind of where we are with CANS at this time, if anybody has any questions. Oh, another little piece, we are exploring how we're going to determine which cases to expedite. So we currently have some KDA procedures in place, and again, I think we're going to stick very similar to the KDA process. It's just with the CFT component and the CANS component, we just really want to make sure we're still expediting things as timely as possible, because it can take a little bit of time to get everybody to the table. And one of the challenges I foresee, again, brought up a little bit in the frequently asked questions piece, is how are we going to coordinate, how are we as child welfare going to coordinate with our other mental health plans across the state if we've presumptively transferred children, because our agreement with our mental health provider doesn't necessarily work with every other county. One of the things I can say very positively about that, though, is AB 1299 was a little hiccupy at first, but now that we're doing it consistently, I have been able to work with our neighboring mental health plans and quickly expedite assessments. So in terms of getting cans done, I'm sure it will be very similar, a little bumpy at first, but we'll eventually figure out how we're going to continue that forward. So that's where we are.
Great, thank you, Julianne. If you have questions directed to Merced County and their implementation plan and process, leave everyone. Okay, do we have folks on the line that are, everyone's unmuted. Yeah. Please, you're unmuted and you want, just unmute yourself in order to ask a question, please. Otherwise, keep us on mute. Does anyone have a question for Merced? Okay. Okay, we do have one from the mailbox, Janine.
Okay. So for Merced, when is your first case plan completed, and how does the cans get completed before the case plan?
That is a good question. Yeah, I heard the question. The case plan, our first case plan, very similar across the board, is within 60 days of detention by disposition. Can you guys hear me?
No.
Yeah, hold on.
This is Bert.
Folks, again, please, if you're mute the phone if you're not speaking.
Thank you. Who has the baby? Mute your phone.
So somebody with a dog and a child has their phone not muted. So if you have a dog or child in the background, you're the one we can hear.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, go ahead, Julianne. Sorry for the interruption.
That's okay. So we're pretty good about getting to disposition within 60 days of detention and completing that initial case plan within that time. That is a very good question, because it's something we continue to explore, is how do we get all these pieces in line by disposition so that we've had our initial child and family team meeting, our assessments complete of the child, we have an idea of the cans, where they're headed with their mental health treatment, if any, and then how do we incorporate that into our case plan. So I think, again, we talk a lot in terms of ideally what is going to happen, and I think, ideally we know how it's going to look, that we are able to, within the first 30 days, get that assessment complete, get the cans back so that we have the cans to have by the child and family team meeting. Our initial child and family team meeting, currently we're at about 45 days from the date of detention is our average. And then we are able to have a little bit of information before we file the case plan. But again, that's ideal. We're new, we've only done 4, so we haven't really had that opportunity to see if everything lines up into the timelines.
Great, thank you for that explanation, and reminding folks that in process, as we roll out, the timelines will get shorter as we put our processes in place and develop our partnerships, and as those are in place, things will start running more smoothly for sure.
Another question.
We have another question from Merced.
Okay. Can you explain what you mean by having a provider meeting when you have a safety concern?
One of the things we've discussed with our behavioral health as well as our facilitator, because we contract our facilitation, is that just as an example, again, we haven't had it come up, but as an example, if a child has disclosed potentially sexual abuse, for example, and there's the potential that we haven't necessarily fully investigated this allegation, we may have a perpetrator of some type of abuse in the room and not the whole team realizes it. We want to make sure that the child is safe when discussing the cans. So we've talked about having more of a provider meeting if we feel something comes up that could jeopardize the safety of any member of the child and family team. That provider meeting could happen before the child and family team meeting, depending on scheduling. To make sure that everybody's aware that this might be a sensitive subject. So we may summarize around a certain area of the cans or even the case plan to ensure safety for the team.
Okay, thank you. I really like that demonstration of collaboration, especially that's what we referred to earlier when talking about the summarization of items that might be sensitive in nature. A great example. Do we have any other questions for Merced? No? Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
What is it downstairs?
Okay, what's the last one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Last one, Janine, do you have that one?
They're just asking
No.
for the officer of the day.
Okay, hello, Merced.
Yes.
Do you obtain
I want a TA call, otherwise I would, sorry.
substance use info from the cans, since it has different confidentiality requirements? Were you able to hear that?
Yes, I did. It will be a different confidentiality requirement. So we're currently working with our partners to determine what the release will look like to share the substance use information. But it is a conversation we've had because we want to make sure that we are within all of the confidentiality requirements. And that's something that I think we can easily resolve in terms of just making sure we have the language correct on the release, or maybe having a secondary release specific to SUDS.
Okay, fantastic. April, do you have some experience with that, with how some of our other partners are dealing with the substance abuse confidentiality that you can share with us?
What Merced is doing is pretty typical. They're making the release of information process kind of a standard part of the collaboration and information sharing process between the entities, the sectors. So, so what they're modeling is actually what's happening in a lot of different places.
Okay, great. And Merced, if you don't mind, if you have that, when you have that in place, that release, if you don't mind sharing that with CDSS as a sample, we would appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is Kim Suderman, CBHDA. Just wanted to also say that there is some dialogue still happening between CBHDA and DHCS regarding the SUDS piece as well. And once we kind of finish sorting that, I'll be able to report back to everyone too.
Okay, great. Fantastic. We know that that's the subject that we receive a lot of questions about, CDSS, and it's something that we are actively working on here as well. Any more questions for Merced? No? Okay, we have about 15 minutes left. We can move on. We're going to try to address item by item some of our webinar inbox questions. We'll try to go down the list and get to as many as we can in the next 15 minutes. So if our subject matter experts can stay on the line for this part and chime in. The first one is the can supposed to be administered to the child and the child's caregiver, or the child and the child's parents? April, would you like to take that?
Can you say that again? I'm sorry, I lost you.
No, that's okay. Is the can supposed to be administered to the child and the child's caregiver, or the child and the child's parents? I'm assuming meaning biological parents there?
It depends on the situation of the child. So the CANS is supposed to provide support to the caregiver providing care to the child. So the child welfare version, the IP CANS, has 4 different caregiver sections, so you could complete it for up to 4 caregivers. The behavioral health version, the California CANS 50, only has 1. So what you have to do is complete that thinking about the caregiving system, and every item you should think about which caregiver might need support on that item, complete it for that caregiver, and make a note as to which caregiver you are talking about. So it really depends on which version you're filling out, and that kind of dictates how you're going to approach the caregiver section.
Okay, great. Thank you. We have another kind of a reflection about when we have multiple entities completing CANs, and this is from Sacramento County. Is Alan organizing today? Okay.
Sarah.
So I wanted some clarification. If we have an FFA who is already doing cans as part of their program statement, as part of their practice, and the county also has, a agreement in place to do cans, let's say by behavioral health, how do we avoid the duplication? Would we ask, how would you suggest we approach that, April?
So always be thankful that you have a CANS that you can build on. So if if there's a CANS on a child that comes into care, then be happy you have that CANS and you can build on that to update and complete the CANS. If you have a child coming from child welfare who starts behavioral health services, and there's a CANS complete on that child, then you just build on the CANS. So we don't necessarily want to repeat the entire discovery process, so it requires building on the existing CANS and talking to whoever is holding that existing CANS so you can get more of the information from them.
Right, okay, exactly, okay. And so in cases where there's already been one CANS completed, the update can be done by the initial person completing that can use the other CANS to help update the existing CANS as well. Is that correct?
Yes.
Can I just jump in? This is Kim Suderman, CBHDA. There really should be some dialogue, again, between the placing agency and the mental health plan and the FFA in this example to determine who's going to take the lead on the update so that there's not duplication. And then for future ones as well, because you've got two agencies responsible to ensure it gets done. And just like in that situation, you don't want both agencies doing it twice. And the same now with a third entity that has that as part of their program statement. So it just requires communication for a future update.
And when you say duplication, Kim, this is April, I think what you mean is duplication of asking questions and talking to the family, because the CANS will get, the form completion will get duplicated on both sides, right?
Right.
Okay.
No, I mean, just don't keep that, because the family's going to go, like, why do you keep, everybody keeps asking me the same question.
Absolutely.
Right, and the FFA, typically does have a lot of contact with the family and maybe just doing it on a rolling basis as well, right? They're seeing someone weekly and can provide input to the county. So you're right, the communication stream is really important, and we certainly don't want to over-assess our youth and family and caregivers as well, especially when they have multiple kids in the house that CANS are being completed for on behalf of. So moving on, I know that we have some additional questions here. Okay, Janine has one.
Can you list disciplines able to complete the CANS? Is it a master's or bachelor's level? Can a case manager complete the CANS?
This is April, I can answer that. So in the reference guides, both of them, it says that you should have a bachelor's degree. And that is kind of a general standard we hold. So a caseworker could complete the CANS. However, we have also trained and certified and have some really great folks who only have high school diplomas who have completed the CANS. The main issue with completing the CANS is the reading level. So the reading level of the reference guide is probably 9th grade. That's really the only issue.
Okay, great. We're looking at.
Hi, this is Allison Book. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah, hi, Allison.
Hello. Hi. Hey, April. So Allison Book with Northern Training Academy. Just wanted to loop back to the comment about the CANS for behavioral health only including one caregiver section. And I'm wondering if that's going to be changed or standardized, because the intent is that the CANS replaces the SDM, Family Strengths and Needs Assessment, and Child Strengths and Needs Assessment. But to do that, it needs to be an assessment of the child's actual parents, not their foster parent. And so just curious about if there will be changes in that, or if there's just been conversation about standardizing so that there's only one CANS between child welfare and behavioral health across the state so that there aren't these differences between the two versions.
So Allison,
Go ahead, April.
Your first part of your question, Allison, is the link to SDM. That's really if they complete the child welfare version, there's 4 sections there, right?
Right. Yes, but if behavioral health is completing the CANS and using the CANS 50, then that's going to be lacking. So then is the idea then that child welfare would need to do that piece on the IP CANS?
I believe so. Now, saying behavioral health is completing it is a little vague because behavioral health as a third contracted entity would complete the IP CANS, right? So, but if it's behavioral health through the mental health plan, you're right. They only have one that they're completing. Now, the second question around aligning the versions is not one I can answer.
That Chuck, I think if Chuck is still on the call, it would be good for Chuck from DHCS to respond.
I'm still on the call, but I don't think I have a response. The question, though, just to make sure that I understand, is that there are some additional items on the child welfare CANS, and you're wanting to know if the core 50 is what you're saying, and you're wanting to know if those are going to be kind of brought together at some point in the future. Is that right?
Yeah, that's part of it, because ideally that would simplify everything to have them be the same version. But my specific question is about if the version that mental health is using only has room for one caregiver. That's problematic for the child welfare side of things because, again, the CANS is being completed within 60 days of kids entering care. Those kids are going to be in family reunification, and so they are going to have at least, 2 to 4 caregivers.
Okay. I don't have a response, so we'll need to have a conversation about that with my management and determine sort of how we respond.
Right, and this is Locke from
Richard.
I think one of the ideals that at least CDSS has expressed is at some point in the far future that there be a single instrument that is used. What happened with ACL 1809 when both DHCS as well as CDSS wrote that letter about CANS is that both departments agreed that to use, in essence, the core 50 for 2 different purposes. So one purpose is on the DHCS side in terms of, and Chuck and others can go into that, but there's a particular purpose and in actuality a different population for utilization of CANS on the DHCS side of the shop versus what we created, the CANS IP, specifically for child welfare for a different purpose. So whether or not the 2 will align, including having the 4 different components for caregivers, is something as Chuck said, it's not been discussed yet, at least at this stage, even from the child welfare side of things.
Okay, thank you, Locke, for clarifying.
Yeah, I think we have time for one more.
Time for one more question.
There's some follow-up to that question.
Oh, is there a follow-up? Okay.
Look at the bottom.
Kim Stowell.
Kim, you're unmuted if you'd like to speak.
Hi, Kim. Can you?
I can. So my question is that the issue of the FSNA being replaced by the CANS is a bigger question because the FSNA addresses the case plan needs. It's a true assessment tool for the family, not just the child, where the CANS is really an assessment of the child's needs in the totality of the family, but it really is just the child. So by eliminating the FSNA, we've kind of undone a tool that we use to establish case plan goals for the family.
Richard, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, Richard.
I just want to suggest that, building on this conversation, until we have a singular unified instrument, I just would, I think, echo Kim Suderman's earlier reflections that a local conversation and building some process into an MOU might be useful. But even before that, this may be a situation where the child welfare staff, the case carrying staff, are going to need to do just a little bit more kind of traditional assessment with the bio-kin in order to satisfy the core plan.
Okay, thank you. And Kim, I will, this is Rebecca. I think you put your question in the chat as well, and I'll bring that internally for internal discussion too, and then respond back to you individually.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Okay, we have just 2 minutes left. One last question what's the question? I should have. Okay, we can. No. Okay. All right. Well, it looks like we've got some follow-up questions to that. We have one more. Okay. Okay.
Anna Sandberg, you're unmuted.
Okay, Anna, you want to go ahead and ask your question? Anna?
She doesn't have access. So her question is, sounds like it would say that when a client is in both systems, that both agencies have the requirement to complete the paperwork for their respective departments. Is that correct? Even though the questioning of the family will be attempted to be minimal or by one or the other?
Correct. I would, right, as both departments have a requirement for completing the CAN, and as we've been speaking all along about working in partnership and through communication, it may be apparent that both providers and the county will have to complete the CAN's paper and submit to their respective departments. But we hope that that's done in collaboration and not entirely in duplication. That makes sense.
Yeah, and this is law from CWDA. There are at least 2 instances where a child may end up on both sides. One is that the child was being actively provided services through behavioral health, through mental health services, and the CANS was conducted, and at some point in the future, they then become a child welfare case. The other situation is that the child started as a child welfare case. There was no interaction with the mental health system, but for whatever reason, through the CANs, through other assessments, the child was determined to have specialty mental health services and whatnot, and therefore a referral was made to mental health because of the I forget if it's 9 or 10, as part of the screening tool, the mental health screening tool. If you get at least a 1 on any of the behavioral or emotional health, that automatically triggers a screening by mental health. So in that particular case, if they go and then do a complete assessment and find out that there should be services and should be updated CANs, that's the other way where the child would end up in both systems. However, if the child is assessed and then it is determined that the child does not need any services, but it's just happened that the county, the CANS assessor for the county happens to be on the mental health side, that's a very different question in terms of that. Yeah, so in the first 2 cases, if the child truly is in both systems, then there is some level of paperwork, so to speak, and on the mental health side, there's actually further obligations for reporting and data entry and whatnot.
Okay, great.
But in addition to that, so this is Anna Sandberg. So in addition to that, it sounds like you're saying that both agencies would be required to submit
And with child welfare, we will have two options, either the paper or the CANS CARES automated system, correct?
Correct.
That's the data entry piece of it on the child welfare side, yes.
Right, and is it mandated that the automated system in CANS CARES be used, or will the paper be sufficient?
I think it's an opt-in for counties to use the CARES system. When you're talking about paper, you're talking about
the scan function, when that becomes available.
Function, right. Right. That will be a continued option to be used.
Okay.
The
so
state
how
will
else
get
are we
back to you on
reporting that?
yeah. The state will get back to you on that in terms of the clarification, because there are some nuances between whether or not it's CANS 1.0, 1.1, et cetera. So let the state get back to you on that.
Okay.
Right, but it's more so of like, how are we documenting then that a CANS has been done if we're not using either of those two systems? In order to meet our goal of accountability.
Right. The full aspect has, it hasn't been quite determined yet. So let the state get back to you.
Yeah, we'll get back to. I mean, the paper CANS would be contained in the case file for now. But as far as for the data entry, they'll have to get back to you on that.
Okay. Well, it sounds like it's still a work in progress.
Yes. Okay, so we're actually over time today. I know we still have some outline questions in the chat room, and there's a couple of people we need to follow back up with following the meeting. That we will do our best to do that prior to the next biweekly call. With holidays and such in place, it may extend. We have some internal discussions as well, and some other things to work out for some policy decisions, some topics that were brought up today. But thank you all for joining, and we will, our next call is scheduled for January the 9th. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.